Hello everyone, good afternoon. Just thought I'd come on a couple minutes early just to make sure that this live video is working. My name is Eve Marshall and I'm doing a demo on how to do needle felted Easter eggs today. So we'll just wait until we've got some more people on and then I'll get started. Today we're going to be making a stripy Easter egg. This is quite a quick, nice project, so you could make a couple of them. They look quite nice on an Easter tree. My friends have one of those trees that are made out of all like pussy willow and willow branches that they have up sort of all year, and they just change the decorations on it to suit them. So these work quite well. The most important thing is it's quick and easy. So when I'm teaching felting workshops at Riverside Beads, what I like to do is show you sort of the instant gratification of felting rather than the stabbing for hours and sort of coming away with nothing type felting. So I'm going to show you a couple different techniques to make your needle felted Easter egg today. I've got this lovely sunflower here too because we're doing a workshop on the 9th of April in store to make a wet and needle felted sunflower, and the money raised goes to helping people in Ukraine. So that's why this lovely sunflower is there, just to advertise that. So we'll talk a little bit about the materials we're using today. So you can see there's a big pile of polystyrene eggs now. Needle felting, sometimes I use polystyrene and sometimes I use just wool, but for this project, because it's an Easter egg at the end of the day, you know, you're going to hang it on a tree, it's going to be used as a decoration, so you don't have to have just solid wool. It's also a bit of a pain to needle felt wool into an egg shape. That takes so much time, and then you then have to decorate it. So needle felting onto polystyrene means that you can come up with something quite quickly and then make 6 of them in an afternoon rather than just having one at the end. So we've got polystyrene eggs there. You can see they're all different sizes. And over here I have some merino wool top. Great because it comes in like loads of colours. If you've been in the shop, you'll see that there's loads and loads of colours of merino wool. And I think at Riverside Beads they cut it so it's about 1 meter long. I mean, you probably could get about 10 eggs or so out of one piece, so you don't use a lot of supplies. And then for our stripes we're going to be using bits of knitting wool. This is actually tapestry wool. I found about 5 or 6 years ago that at charity shops around here I could go and buy a large amount of tapestry wool for a very small amount of money because not many people use it anymore. But it also means that you can get it in like really little pieces rather than buying a massive ball of wool. Because I'm not a knitter, I don't have lots of odds and ends, but I know a lot of you do other crafts, so you might have some more odds and ends of little bits of colour at the end. Although it does need to have a percentage of wool in it, so tapestry wool is usually 100% wool, but I've done it with wool that's only say 50% wool and it will still needle felt in. So then we have our needles. Now when you buy felting needles, they look like little walking sticks and they come in all different sizes. So when I'm needle felting, I really only use 2 needles, 2 sizes. So we've got a size 36, which is quite coarse. It looks a lot scarier than the 38. It's very hard to tell the difference between what needle is what if you're just picking them up. But in these two, one looks quite scary and one looks slightly less scary. But because they are more of a throwaway tool, I'd say, so they don't last very long, especially when you're just starting out, because you're more likely to snap them. So they don't have a number on them like knitting needles do. So really, I know at the shop they sell 3 different sizes, 32, 36 and 38. 36, 38 does pretty much everything I want it to. 32 is good if you're using a lot of core wool to get started. So then I put my needles into these handles because it makes it easier for me to hold them. And they're just sort of made out of wood. They've got a little cork inside them, and you just hook the needle over the cork and push it back into the hole. Now, to tell the difference between my 2 ones, I've got a little star on top of the fine one and nothing on top of the thick one. I'm working on top of a piece of foam, and that's mainly to protect my fingers. When you're building up something like an animal, say, it's easier to work on a piece of foam because it needs to get quite firm before you can really hold it. So if I'm working on an egg, I don't want to hold it in my hand because I'm a lot more likely to stab my hand, which will hurt a lot. So the piece of foam there is just as a safety measure, less likely to break needles, less likely to stab yourself. Okay, so I'm going to start with this egg here. And I'm going to grab a bit of this wool top, wool roving merino wool, and I'm just going to pull off little pieces from the top. So you don't want a lot of wool to begin with, and I'm just going to fluff it out a bit because the sort of fluffier this wool is, the better it needle felts on. And I'm going to lay it on top of my egg. Now I'm going to use the thicker needle first. You can see my other hand isn't where I'm about to stab. And then I'm just going to push the fibers down. So that crunching noise that you hear is those barbs on my needle going through the wool and into the polystyrene egg. Now if I stabbed in the same place for like 5 minutes, eventually the polystyrene would like eat away at itself and you get dandruff everywhere and it wouldn't be pretty. But if you just stab all the way around it, it will attach. Now I know this looks like a crazy minion, but don't worry. We don't worry how fluffy it is at this stage because the main purpose of using the thick needle is to attach the wool quickly to the egg. And then you can go back and you can make it all flat and beautiful. But with the thick needle, what I tell people when they're in a workshop with me is to get the egg covered in the next 5 minutes, okay? Because you don't want to really spend a lot of time making it beautiful, because once you add all your decoration to it, the fibers will flatten down. So if you look at wool under a microscope, it's got little tiny barbs on it, just like the needle does. So every time that the needle is pushing down into the fibers are rubbing against each other like that, and they're connecting with each other basically. So they're connecting with the polystyrene, which is great, but they're also connecting with each other. So once you get a whole layer going over this egg, then it will start connecting more to itself and getting firmer and getting less fluffy. So if I didn't fluff up my wool first, and I just took a piece and laid it like that and stabbed it in, it's a lot harder to get sort of the look I want from it. I tend to find that if I'm taking wool and wrapping it around my egg, I get a sort of mummified look to it, which is a shame. So don't want mummified look. You can see I've got a little gap there. I'm just going to pull off another little bit of wool and put it on top. Now, the thing about needle felting is, in the first couple minutes or so of needle felting things, if you don't like something, you can pull it off again. So you can see there, I pulled it off. There's little gaps and things in there. Once I've needle felted it a lot, you know, 5 or so minutes all over it, it's a lot harder to peel it off because it's getting to the sort of completely felted stage. As the fibers tighten up over this egg, the gaps between the wool become so fine that this needle won't go through them anymore, and then I know it's time to swap to the finer needle. It's very important when you're using the needle that you go straight down and straight out with it. So I would never lay my wool like this and try and come in from the side, because the needle will snap. They're very brittle. So it's better to sort of move your egg around as you're working on it so that the needle's always going straight down and straight out. If you try and pull in fibers like a sewing needle, it will break. It's not very strong. So you can see there I've got a crazy purple egg, loads of fibers sticking out of it. Don't worry about that. The more you stab it, the firmer and more compressed it will be. So I could swap over to my fine needle now and just work on smoothing areas of that out all over it. And you can see now that that area's gone a lot smoother than this area here, which is very fluffy. So let's swap over to this one here. So this one I have felted a lot more with the finer needle, and it's gone a lot more compressed, you can see. A lot of people ask me when I'm teaching what happens about all the little holes in it. So eventually the moisture in the air gets rid of the holes. You don't really see them anymore. Yeah. Only as you're working on it, those holes are happening because you're pushing your needle through, but eventually you don't notice them anymore. So I want to decorate my egg now. So I'm going to find a colour of wool, and let's start with a dark colour so you can see it well. So let me grab my scissors. I can see lots of you have tuned in. I can't hugely read when you write anything, so I'm sorry. If you make a comment, I'll definitely reply once we're done with the video. Okay, so I've got my piece of tapestry wool. I'm going to lay it where I want it. And then with a finer needle, I'm just going to stab it in place. So I don't want to hold it taut between my fingers because the fibers need to pull back on themselves and go a bit wibbly wobbly. If you hold it too taut when you're stabbing it in, it won't attach, and basically you'll pick it up and it will fall off. But as you can see, it's starting to attach there, so it won't come off as I shake it around. If I wanted to take it off, I could peel it off and there wouldn't be any harm done. So getting to the other side now, easiest thing to do is overlap and trim it off. So that's one stripe. Now let's have, well, that won't go all the way around. Let's have a green stripe. So your stripes can be next to each other, or they don't have to be. So I could leave a gap, say, between the two stripes there. I'm just going over with the needle a couple times just to hold it in there nicely. And I'm just sort of measuring the gap between the two threads as about, I think it's probably 1 centimetre or so. But it's probably hard just to get it completely measured the whole way through. So if you get to the other side and it's a bit wibbly, you can always push it with your needle so it gets a bit more space there. So I've got a very narrow gap there and I've got a wider gap there, so I can just push my needle down there, push the gap out so it's the same all the way around. Now that I've added those two stripes, I might take off a bit of merino wool here, and I could put a stripe with that going through if I wanted to. So just holding it there with one hand and pushing it in with the needle. Or if I didn't want a stripe, I could do spots, so I can pull off a little bit of wool there and roll it round. Now, when you stab it, it's only going to attach where you stab it, so if you only go round in a circle, it's only going to get attached in a circle. So you can see there, I can make little dots on my piece. If you want to make a part where it can hang, you can pull off a piece of tapestry wool and knot it, and then you can stab it into the top of your egg. So that probably wouldn't be that strong, although you can tell if it's gonna hang all wonky by doing that. So I'm just gonna pull off a little bit of purple and lay it over the tapestry wool and just stab it in, so it's like a little piece of tape going over there to hold it in nicely. So that's how I do that one. So you can then go with however much decoration you want with it, and the wool doesn't have to go around and around and around. We could make something a bit more interesting. So if I grab some yellow here, then you'll be able to see it. If I go to the top of my ball there and just push it down there, you can see that I could create a whole swirl. And as I'm pushing the fibres into the purple wool, it's making them a bit firmer and a bit tighter and a bit less like you're seeing all the little dots where we put them in. And then I just trim that off there, and I've got a bit of a swirl. So you can cover your egg with purple wool or with a different color of merino wool. That's a nice way to start it. You can also use sort of more natural wool. So this is a carded bat of cheviot wool, and cheviot's one of my favorites to use when I'm needle felting animals and things. So if you have core wool or something like that at home, then you can use that to cover your egg too. So you can just pull off a chunk and with your thicker needle just push it in. So that gives you sort of a nicer look to it a bit quicker. It's also cool if you want to go with sort of more of a natural design, because then you could use natural wools. I think this one is sort of spun alpaca wool, or it's more of an alpaca fibre rather than a wool. And then I could lay that on there to have sort of a more of a natural looking decoration on there. On this one you can see that I've covered it with the white carded bat, and then I've added a swirly pink line going between my stripes, and then I've added little spots in there. Now the problem is with starting needle felting is you probably won't ever finish, because it's really addicting when you start it and you just keep stabbing and keep adding decoration, and then you look up and like 3 hours have gone by and all you have is one egg, but it's one amazing egg. You can see with this egg here I've added some little pansies and some swirly wools and some spots, because it's just such an enjoyable project to do. You just keep going with it. Now you could decide to add different decorations to your egg too. So if I grab some white wool, you could go with a different type of decoration. So I'm fluffing it up again, because it's easier to work with when it's fluffy. So if I shove that one in there. Now it's up to you how much you felt it. So just stabbing it for say 30 seconds or so it will stay on there if it's just used as a decoration, but as soon as someone starts to pick it up and look at it and point at it, it might sort of come off a bit, so you probably want to stab it a bit longer than that. But I'm going to make a odd looking sheep on here. Let me just grab some darker wool. There we go. So I've got a big fluffy lump for his body, and then I'll just give him a little head. So once you've covered it with wool, you know, you can decorate it however much you want to, and you could use the tapestry wool to write someone's name on it, or write Happy Easter if you really want to, or you could write love on it, or friend, or something. So there we go, got a little sheep on there. Also you could do a flower, so let's think daffodils. You could have a yellow splodge on there. And then an orange splodge in the middle. So we've got some workshops coming up at the shop. I teach all of the felting workshops in the shop. We've got one coming up to raise money for people in Ukraine, and that's to make sunflowers. There's my sunflower there. That's on April the 9th. It's just a 1-hour workshop, so it's a quick sort of introduction to wet felting. Riverside Beads and Crafts is donating the supplies, and I'm donating my time, so all the money that you pay for the class, which is £5, goes to help the people in Ukraine. There we go, we've got a little daffodil there and a sheep. Okay, so the stripy egg that I showed you here is just tapestry wool onto polystyrene too. So you can either have a background and then decorate it like I did with my big crazy egg there, or you can just start with odds and ends of wool and an egg and decorate it. So I've got my pile of wool here, and I can just start wrapping it around the egg. I prefer to cover my egg first with a colour, because I find this takes a bit longer to do, and then sometimes you get gaps, and sometimes the stripes don't lay very straight. Sometimes you run out of the colour that you want and it's mid-stripe. I think also the sound of it is a bit more crispier just doing the tapestry wool on the egg. So you can see I've gone round a couple times, but you get a bit of a gap there. So you can do it again and again and again, and you eventually get an egg that's covered with stripes. I recommend covering it with the wool first, because then you have a background, so then it doesn't really matter what you're adding on top of it. You know, stripes and swirls and dots and spots and things, you can just keep adding, but then you always have that background behind it. So I think that's all we're doing today, showing you how to do needle felted eggs. I hope that if you've enjoyed this sort of mini live, that you might end up coming along to a workshop, we're doing, of course, the wet felted sunflowers. In a couple weeks, in a month or so, we're doing wet felted landscapes. So you can see that big crazy bluebell wood there. Quite a nice project to do. And then we're doing a needle felted animal workshop too, later on in the year. So we've got, you can make an animal of your choice. That's a mouse and an owl, but whatever you'd like to do. And then all the supplies that we've used today, you can buy at Riverside Beads, except for the tapestry wool, but most of you, I'm sure, have odds and ends boxes. Thank you for everyone who tuned in and watched me. I hope you have a lovely afternoon. Bye.